Christ the life of all the living. This hymn goes through a lot of opposite ideas, a lot of comparisons, a lot of contradictions, maybe you could say, and it's used in a lot of purpose statements, 4-4-why statements. This bad thing happened to Jesus for what? So that he can give us this good thing. So you'll want to watch for that. And you might want to use some kind of, language feature, body shifting or expression, 4-4, something to show both the contrast and the purpose. Maybe you don't want to emphasize it all the time because it might actually become a little bit too much, but you want to be able to emphasize it and point it out at least sometimes because it is there throughout the whole hymn. So, stanza 1. Without Christ, apart from Christ, we are dead. We have no life. With him, we have life because he gives life and he is life. And so here we're talking about spiritual life, of course, not physical life. So how do you say that in one succinct sentence? Christ, you are life for all believers. Maybe something like that. I would be a little bit hesitant to say that he is life for all living people because that might be misunderstood to mean all people, whether they believe or not, because you're going to think about physical life. So that's why I would maybe say believers instead of the living. You defeated death. Your death defeated death, our enemy. Yourself once giving to the darkest depths of woe. That's talking about his crucifixion and his suffering, that he sacrificed himself. He was crucified, and that was dark and terrible. Because of your suffering, death, and merit, that's payment, I inherit life eternal. Thousand thanks are due. Dearest Jesus, unto you I say thank you again. So, dearest Jesus, unto you. Stanza 2. Jesus accepted on himself. He has taken on the bonds. Jesus was tied up. Stripes talks about the soldiers, the Roman soldiers, whipping him. Rod means that they beat him. People hated him, they hurt him, but he saved my soul. He saved me from sin's bondage and slavery forever. So then thousand thanks are due, dearest Jesus, unto you. Stanza 3. Jesus, people hated you and beat you. That's the smiting. Beat him, and he accepted it so that he could heal me. He suffered, sad, alone. For what? To give rest for my weary soul. The next line talks about the curse of God. This goes back to Genesis chapter 3, where Adam sinned, and so God cursed all of creation. His law judges and condemns sin, and all of that condemnation was poured out on Jesus. So Jesus suffered under God's curse. Now, if you use the word curse, probably that's going to be misunderstood. So I would probably say something like God punished Jesus for our sin. And that that promises blessing for me. Stanza 4. When Jesus was crucified, people stood around and mocked him and hated him. So the thorns, they crowned him. All of that shame he bore, accepted. Why? What for? So that I will belong to him, and he will crown me with heavenly glory. So he suffered the crown of thorns, and I received the crown of glory in heaven. Stanza 5. Good first line. Thou hast suffered men to bruise thee. This word had to come up sometime. The old meaning of suffer, to permit, to allow, not suffer. Jesus allowed people to beat him, to free me from pain. Jesus' enemies falsely accused him so that I can be safe and free. Your soul suffered without comfort. Maybe I would say that he had no one to comfort him. What for? That you can comfort me when I suffer. Stanza 6. You suffered terribly, and you accepted it, you bore it patiently, even death by crucifixion, fully to atone for me. What does atone mean? I see many people say atonement means at one meant. So it means to make one, to make united, or to reconcile. And that's true. That gets most of the concept, but I think we're missing just a little bit with that. Let me give you an example. My kids, just made up, my kids didn't actually do this, but suppose my kids are playing baseball in the yard and one of them hits the ball, goes through a neighbor's window. Well, my kid is terrified what the neighbor is going to think and do. And my neighbor is pretty angry. Well, what do? I tell my kid, don't worry, I will take care of it. And I tell my neighbor, don't worry, I will take care of it. Okay? That is atonement. Because atonement pays for wrongs for someone else. It pays for wrongs. It satisfies anger, and it reconciles. And so Jesus, atoning for our sin, Jesus paid for our sin. He satisfied God's judgment and his anger against sin. And Jesus reconciled us. So include all that in this line. I would emphasize, just to make it more simple, Jesus was crucified, died to pay and reconcile, or maybe to pay my sin and reconcile us with God. He let people torment him. Torment, maybe this, pick on, something like that. He let people torment him to save me from hell. And I do this for hell, just because, other signs for hell can be misunderstood as like cursing or something, swearing. Stanza 7. For all you did to forgive me, for your sorrows, not this kind of sorrow, sadness kind of sorrow, for your sorrows or grief, deep, awful, for your suffering in the garden. What do you sign for that? I've not seen a good, consistent sign for garden, at least not one that I like. So for this, maybe you're suffering and praying on the mountain, because that's where the garden is, the Mount of Olives there. For your groaning, sighing, bleeding, dying, for your last triumphant cry, last shout of victory, I will praise you in heaven. What a hymn. Hopefully you can make all the comparisons and purpose statements clear. It's a good hymn that really digs into everything that Jesus did for us. God's blessings as you sign this.